Good morning. We're here with Michael Wallace, reporter for the Miami Heat. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. I know it took a lot.
Hey, I'm blessed to be here. Thank you for having me. As I told you before, I'm just impressed with the fact that you guys have put together a wonderful studio, wonderful show, and I'm honored to be here.
Well, first I want to start off by saying congratulations on the big win last night. LeBron took home 49 points. That's amazing.
Yeah, 49 points. I mean, I've seen a lot of LeBron James's basketball games, especially since he came to Miami. And, you know, the guy shows me something every single night. You know, there's not one night or one game that goes by where you can take anything he does for granted. And he was phenomenal. This is a game that Miami wanted to win. They have bigger goals than getting past Brooklyn, but LeBron said, look, I can't leave anything to chance, and he went out there and dominated the game.
Never disappoints you. How has the Heat's success impacted business?
It's been great. I wouldn't be in my position right now if the Miami Heat did not say, let's go get LeBron James, and LeBron didn't say 4 years ago, I want to take my talents to South Beach. You know, before I had this position with ESPN, I was with the Miami Herald, so I was covering the team still. But when LeBron James announces he's coming to Miami, ESPN created a team of reporters to cover this guy and to cover this team in this time. And I'm one of the lead reporters that got promoted from the Miami Herald up to ESPN.
So just because LeBron came?
Because of LeBron. I mean, one man is that powerful when he, that shows you how much power he has in this league.
So do you think the Heat will take another championship this year?
I think so. I can't see anyone that can beat them when they're focused and when they're healthy. LeBron can't do it by himself, although he did, you know, in that last game. But the bottom line is that it's going to take guys like Dwayne Wade and, you know, the supporting cast, Chris Bosh and Mario Chalmers. It's going to take a team effort because the league has gotten better. It's going to be harder for Miami to win this year than it was in any other year before that.
Do you think James and Wade are coming back next year?
They better. They better. Like you said, it's good for business. I do think those guys love playing with one another. I think that they do have the options in their contracts to leave if they want to, but they do have contracts that are designed to keep them in Miami for at least another 2 years.
Do you think the Heat can bring home more players around Bosh and LeBron and Wade to win more games?
That's going to be the biggest challenge because there are rules within the NBA salary structure with how teams can build rosters, and LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade make a combined $60 million. That only leaves about $5 to $7 more million before it gets really expensive and the teams started penalizing. Teams are being penalized for how much they spend. So it's going to be tough, but who wouldn't want to come play with LeBron James? We've seen it happen year after year that somebody wants to come down and give themselves a chance to win a championship.
What can Miami do to keep them?
Win. I think keep winning. You know, the more that they're winning championships, I think the better their chances are of staying together. You know, who wants to leave when you're on top? They're definitely on the top of their game right now. They get to play in a great city, warm weather, no state income tax. There's a lot of benefits to coming to Miami, staying in Miami and playing with LeBron.
Well, do you agree with the statement that black coaches have less of a chance than white coaches? I know, for example, Mark Brown was hired, then fired in the same year. And then Mark D'Antoni with the Lakers, he was there for more than a year, but he didn't have the same progress, yet they still kept him and gave him a chance.
Yeah, that's a tough question because I do think that it's a good old boy network in the league. You hear that certain guys get recycled and get more opportunities and more chances to keep their jobs and maintain jobs. But I do think the NBA is a sport that has proven a great track record for diversity. African-American players are 80% of the players in the league. There are a lot of African-American and black executives. You know, you see it right now. You know, Michael Jordan is one of only 30 owners. They have 2 minority owners out of 30. So I think the track record of diversity and progress is evident in the NBA. But there also is a preference there, too. And there are some prejudices that come with being in any form of professional life. But I do think at this stage in the NBA, I don't think there's as much racism or prejudice when it comes to hiring practices as there might be in some other leagues.
Do you think this is the reason that you've made it this far, that you stuck to your goals, you kept accomplishing them, you stay focused? Do you think that's the reason?
I think so. There are times when, you know, I wasn't sure whether I was good enough, you know, to make it. This is my dream job, you know, and it's humbling every single day when I have to wake up and go to work and I'm talking to NBA players and Hall of Famers and and that kind of thing. It's almost like it's a pinch yourself moment, because I remember it wasn't that long ago when, you know, when I was, I knew what I wanted and I just couldn't get the break. I couldn't get the job I needed. I couldn't get, you know, I had to move to a lot of small towns and work for a lot of papers that didn't necessarily put me on track. But the thing is, you know, it was out of my hands, and I'm a faithful and a spiritual person, and I think God created something within me that He knew what was within me before I knew what was in me. And I'm just blessed that I've been able to have the opportunity for Him to have ordered my steps to get to this position. But I do think it takes hard work. It also takes prayer. It takes faith. It takes family. It takes a lot of focus on the right things.
Well, I've been to a lot of conferences, like journalism conferences, and they always tell me, like, start off in the small areas and work your way to the bigger areas, because that's better for your career. Do you agree with that?
I agree with getting to your goal as fast as possible. I know guys that I work with that came right out of college and went right to big papers in big markets. And I used to look at them and I was so envious of them. You know, I was like, man, how come I had to go, you know, first of all, I went to Grambling State University, small school in Louisiana, northern Louisiana. Then after that, I had to go work for Shreveport Times, which you probably couldn't point to Shreveport on the map if you wanted to. You know, then from there, I went to, you know, Tallahassee, Florida, and then Jackson, Mississippi, and then, you know, New Orleans. And then gradually I got an opportunity to come this way. But you have to be willing to go anywhere for a job, because it's all about building. You know, you can't build a house, you know, with 2 or 3 bricks. It takes a lot of foundation. And I think that's what gave me the foundation to know that, hey, I put in the work. So when I do get my opportunity, no one can take it away from me, because I know how hard it took, how much it took for me to get to where I got to.
What obstacles did you face?
Just having to cover things that I didn't want to cover, you know, being in places that I really didn't want to be in, you know, dealing with, you know, beats. For instance, I came in covering high schools. I came in covering education. I came in covering cops and courts and all of those things. And I was like, hold on, I know I wanted to do sports. So, but the jobs that were there were outside of sports. And here's the thing. Here's the unique thing about it. Now that I'm covering sports, and I've been covering sports for the last few years, or many years, I'm covering a lot of sports-related crime stories. You know, athletes that get in trouble, that have to go through the courts.
So it's worth it.
NCAA issues with colleges, and you have to be in a university setting to understand the presidents and how they interact with the athletic directors, and athletic directors interact with the coaches. So all of those things tie in to what I became. And, you know, you have a puzzle, and my life is basically this. 500 pieces of puzzle were just thrown on the floor. And I had to piece it together one step at a time. And then once you see the picture develop, you understand, this is what I was trying to do. This is why I went through what I went through.
So to be clear, you would recommend starting from the bottom and working your way up? You're
going to have to, because if you start at the top, you don't know what it took to get there. And somebody can take it away from you. And then when you do hit adversity, what do you rely on? What do you turn to? You know what I mean? If somebody gives you something that you didn't earn or didn't necessarily earn, how do you know how do you know you're not going to appreciate it? And what are you going to do when it's taken away from you? How do you regroup? What do you fall back on? So I'm just saying, it might not be about starting from the bottom. It's just making sure that you establish a foundation and appreciate and accept whatever foundation that is as you build your way up.
Has anyone ever discouraged you?
Yeah, I mean, in my line of work, you get a lot of unpopular feedback. You know, when you write certain stories or do certain things, you know, with your media and you ask certain questions and cover certain topics, people don't like it. You know, right now we're dealing with an extremely volatile time in the NBA because of the Donald Sterling issue with the racism of the Los Angeles Clippers owner. And a lot of people felt like, you know, hey, he's Donald Sterling. He can say whatever he wants to say. You know, there's no law against him feeling a certain way. Well, that may be true, but there are consequences to feeling a certain way and acting a certain way. So, you know, I get, you know, not everybody's going to like a Michael Wallace story or a Michael Wallace way that he covered something. But you just realize that, okay, all criticism is good criticism if you know how to accept it and move on. You know, you can't just stay there and let that galvanize your mind. You have to be able to say, okay, look, these people are here to hold me back. These people are here to push me forward. What am I going to do? And it's all about how you process it and how you move forward from there.
How can you compare the Heat when you were growing up to the Heat now?
Well, that's a funny question, because when I was growing up, the Heat weren't around. You know, they didn't come in until 1988. So by then I was already 13, 14 years old. I was already in high school by then. But to see where they came from since their inception, I was a fan of the league even back then, growing up in Washington, D.C. And I saw Ronnie Cycli and all those guys, and Alonzo Mournings, and the Sherman Douglases and all those guys. And I think what you see right now is an elite level team that has a chance to be a historically elite level team. And LeBron, they set that tone when Pat Riley got here as the president. They traded for Alonzo Mourning, brought Timmy Hardaway in, contended. Then they got Shaq, won a championship with Dwayne Wade. Now you're seeing them take it to the elite level, the highest level of the game with LeBron James. So they've come a long way. You talk about starting from the bottom, and now they're at the top. That's exactly what they've done.
So let me ask you this. Do you agree that LeBron James is the new Michael Jordan, or he's better than Michael Jordan?
I think he's the first LeBron James. I think I grew up idolizing Michael Jordan. He was the guy of my generation. You know what I mean? He was the guy that, every kid wanted to be like. You wanted to stick your tongue out on the basketball court like he did. You wanted to shave your head bald. You wanted to wear every single pair of Jordans. You wanted to wear your shorts a certain length because they were baggy. He brought all of those stylistic things in. But what he also brought in was a dominance and a determination on the court to be the absolute best. And LeBron has a lot of those same characteristics. And, I'm just not a believer in comparing those two. I know it's a popular subject and people love to do it. But I had a chance to grow up watching Michael, and I've had a chance to cover LeBron James closely. And I think LeBron James has a lot of the same intangibles and characteristics that Mike had. But I think LeBron is doing it in a unique way because I think he's far more of a team player in terms of what he's able to do to get his teammates involved than Michael was. But they're both great players. I think when it's all said and done, Jordan and LeBron are going to be 1 and 2 or 1 and 1A when it comes to how you rank the greatest of all time.
I know when I spoke to Dave Lamont, he was like, why can't we just appreciate them as individuals? Why do we always have to compare them?
That's true.
I agree with that.
That's true. It's not fair all the time to always compare them. But when you're LeBron James, you're flattered because Michael Jordan is the guy you had his posters on your wall. You grew up wanting to be like that. And, I see a lot of, young African-American or minority females in media and in front of TV. And I know Oprah inspired a lot of them, when I was coming up in my generation. So, you always look to someone else to sort of find your own way. And I think there's no shame in using those kind of examples to set the tone.
You mentioned that Oprah inspired a lot of people that wanted to be on TV. Who did you look up to?
Wow. From a media standpoint, that's, I used to, wow, that's a great, I never really thought about it from a media standpoint. Because when I came up, I'm trying to think, I used to watch a lot of, the sports industry changed so much because media guys weren't superstars. Now you see media superstars now. Stephen A. Smiths and, all the guys from ESPN, the guys that are in front of the cameras making a lot of money. Back when I was coming up and watching it and trying to develop, it was strictly news and there wasn't a whole lot of personality in the anchors and that kind of thing. So, but I would still say, just guys that were professional. I used to watch a lot of 60 Minutes. When I was younger. I used to watch a lot of Washington D.C. local guys, and it was a little bit of inspiration from everyone. But more so than anything, I've been more inspired by, my parents, and just the historical factor of taking opportunities that people before me didn't have.
When you were younger, did you ever play a certain sport and fail? Because I know there's a lot of people like football players who wanted to play football, but they couldn't. So they ended up studying broadcasting and communications. That's
exactly what my story was. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was a high school kid, slimmer than this. I had, matter of fact, I played in leagues with Allen Iverson, Jerry Stackhouse, guys that ended up going into the NBA. And I played basketball for high school. Monty Williams, who's the coach of the New Orleans Pelicans now, was in high school with me. We went to the same high school, played on the same team. He was older. Walt Williams, who ended up being a big star at Maryland, University of Maryland, went to the school I went to. So I had a chance to play ball. I wasn't as good. I knew I wasn't making it to the NBA. I got to college on a scholarship, or a couple of scholarships, and once I got there, that was the end for me. So I had to figure out what I was going to do beyond that. I always knew I wanted to be in sports, and I just had to figure out how was I going to make it work. And I think getting into sports broadcasting and sports media was the natural transition for me.
Is there a sport like golf or bowling or anything, any
outside
sport,
of basketball and football,
that no one knows that you secretly enjoy?
Well, I love boxing. That's I dabbled in boxing when I was little, and I've loved it. I grew up in the D.C. area, like I said, and Sugar Ray Leonard was big time back then when I was growing up. But bowling, I do like bowling. Matter of fact, that's one of my family's favorite activities. When we get away, when I have time, we go bowling just to goof around. Other than that, that's it. My hobbies outside of my job, I mean, I love to read. I love reading. I'm deep into history and social justice and social issues. I love biographies and reading how people live their life and how they handle adversities and things of that nature. And like I said, I love studying history, and I think that's and cultures. I love studying histories and other cultures, and that's what sort of gets me through when I get bored with basketball and football.
Was there ever a period in time in your career where you felt like giving up, or you did give up and you didn't have a job or anything?
Yeah, there wasn't a time when I didn't have a job, so I know I'm blessed. I mean, and that can happen at the end of this season. I mean, who knows what contracts and that kind of thing. I could be out of work or whatever. And, but there was a time I remember it had to have been right around, I'm thinking it was before I came to Miami. It was 2004, 2005. And by that time, I had just turned 30. And, I wasn't at the NBA level yet. I wasn't covering a pro team yet by then. And I said, okay, I'm 10 years into my career. I'm not where I want to be yet. Maybe it's not going to happen for me. And there were 3 positions that opened up across the nation. One was in Denver, one was in Miami, and one was, I believe it was in Boston. And so I said, okay, I got 3 strikes here. Let me apply for all 3 of these jobs. And they were NBA jobs. And I said, if it's not going to happen now, it probably won't happen. And initially, it didn't happen. I didn't get a response from any of them. And I said, okay, God, thank you for what you've given me so far. I'm just going to ride it out. Whatever you have for me, I'm just going to accept it. And just when I was ready to give up on becoming an NBA or pro basketball writer, the Miami Herald called me and said, hey, we had a hiring freeze, but we've been able to lift the freeze. The Miami Heat just won a championship. We need for another writer to come down to help the writer we already have. So we're going to have 2 writers covering the Miami Heat instead of 1. Would you be interested?
That's a blessing.
And the funny thing about that story was that 3 months before that call came, my wife and I were on vacation, and we drove through Miami and went to the Keys. And I was like, man, it would be great if I had a chance to live here. And it just the steps sort of just came together. And that's how I know that, my faith is strong, and I know that it takes more than just your own talent. It takes other people to help you out, and it takes opportunities for you to be faithful and trust in your judgment and trust in your faith.
Speaking of your wife, is there ever a time that you have to set aside your family and your work and actually sacrifice your family time for work?
I do. And my daughter, who's a basketball player, she made the varsity as a 9th grader. In 9th grade, she made a varsity basketball team. She's had games upon games where I haven't been able to go to because I'm out of town or I'm covering a Miami Heat game or somebody like that. And I know that she wants me there. She's trying her hardest not to show me that, that she's disappointed when I'm not. But that part of it eats at me. My son, who's her twin brother, he's an amazing musician, saxophone player. And he's in the jazz band at his school. So they have concerts and things of that nature that sometimes I'm not able to get to. And so he would always, record his music that he's going to play and then send it to me in a file when I'm on the road. So I get to hear what he's playing. Those are difficult decisions. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as I get to this stage of my career, I may have to make an adjustment to try to enjoy their high school years. And then maybe once they get off to college, then I can go back and do a little more demanding type work that I'm doing now.
What other job did you consider pursuing besides journalism?
I knew when I was in college, if journalism didn't work out, I wanted to be a physical therapist. I wanted to be a sports trainer. You know what I mean? I said anything I wanted to do I wanted to be in the industry of sports. And I knew that going down that path would require more schooling, more education. And, fortunately it worked out for me where the newspaper industry grabbed me, from college and gave me the opportunities. But I did want to go into sports medicine, and I also wanted to go into education, in some kind of way, working with at-risk teenagers, in major city areas. So I knew one way or another I was going to do one of those things.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Great question, because one of the first mentors I had said to always have a 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year plan. And if you don't have that, then you don't know what you're working for. You're just working, and you're taking everything as it comes. But if you have a plan in front of you, you're always moving towards something, or you should be. So 10 years from now, let's see, I'll be almost 50. I'll be 49 by then. 10 years from now, I hope to be working at a university somewhere, teaching, as a professor, teaching journalism, teaching media, or teaching history, in some kind of regard. And I think that's what I would want to do at the next phase of my career.
So if you can go 15 years from now, what would you do differently that you haven't done?
Oh, going back 15 years?
Yes.
Going back 15 years from now, I probably would have stayed in school and finished up when I was there. Because thankfully, I finally did complete my journalism degree last November, believe it or not. I left school like midway through my senior year to take a job. And fortunately, that didn't cost me because I was still able to advance. It took me longer probably than it should have. But I made it important to go back and take these last few classes, and I finally finished up. So I ended up graduating from college 20 years after I started college. But I wouldn't change anything from that standpoint other than finishing up then and taking advantage of, focusing on my career early, because I had kids at a young age. I expanded, I had a family at a young age. I made some bad relationship choices at a young age. And I just let being human and young and arrogant, cocky, and all that kind of stuff get in the way of me focusing on a career and then letting the blessings come after that.
Well, we've talked about your past. Do you ever plan on retiring?
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to, I want to watch the grandkids at some stage. I want to be. I will always be a learner, though. So even if when I'm done and I can't cover games anymore, or go to games or do anything like that, I still want to be in someone's class or in someone's workshop, in someone's seminar, learning something else. Maybe it's learning how to play the piano. Maybe finally learning how to fish, or something like that. Traveling and doing those kind of things. I always want to be engaged in learning.
Have you done any community service?
All the time. All the time. That's important. My wife is on the board of the Florida State Foster and Adoptive Parent Association. I mentioned before that we adopted 2, a brother-sister sibling group. And so we have 4 kids in the house now. Our twins biologically, and then the 2 that we adopted. And they're the joy of our lives.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I also teach at-risk students who were in the Adolescence Offenders Program. And when they come out of those programs after they're delinquent in school or commit a crime, they have to go through training and sensitivity training and all of those kind of things. So I taught that before. We're always going out and trying. We have a walk, actually, this weekend. We're doing a Duffels for Kids walk at Jungle Island this weekend to raise money to buy luggage for kids that are in the foster and adoptive programs who transition from homes. A lot of times those kids go from home to home with just trash bags. They just throw their stuff in trash bags and then send them on their way to the next home. And what my wife and I and the Foster Association program is doing is trying to raise money to buy those kids duffel bags so that they can, when they do have to transition, they can do that with pride.
What impact do you plan on leaving on journalism today?
The fact that, I think you can do what you do, but what you do isn't who you are. What I do for a living isn't who I am as a man. I'm a reporter by trade, but I'm not a reporter I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm a mentor. I'm someone that loves to get involved in the community. I can walk away from the games and be just as happy doing other things at this point. And I think it's all about perspective. And if I have anything to leave in terms of my imprint and a legacy or whatever, it will be that you can reach your goal, but you have to have faith, and you also have to know who you are when you get that opportunity to be what you've always wanted to be.
Would you encourage an African-American male or female to get in the business?
Absolutely. This field doesn't have enough diversity. It definitely didn't when I got into it, 20 years ago. And that was one of the reasons why I think it was important that I stuck with it, is because I go into these arenas and I go into the media rooms and I see that sometimes I may be one of only 2 black males or African Americans or minorities. I've covered an event where there were 300 reporters and there were only 5 minorities there. So the people who are shaping the opinions and shaping how you view your stories and how you understand what's going on are people who don't necessarily look like you or who might not have the same outlook on life as you do. I'm not saying your race makes you automatically have something in common with the next person that you want to read or write, but I do think you have to have a diversity of perspectives in order to cover the media properly.
Are there any other obstacles regarding race that you had to overcome?
No, just, you know, I think age, you know, when you're in the media, especially in the TV side, there's a lot of age discrimination. Now you're seeing, you can turn on Sports Center or you can turn on any TV, and it seems like it's a cookie cutter model. All of them look exactly the same. You know, whether it's right, blonde hair, blue eyes, rail thin, and they all look. I mean, and it's not it's not a lot of diversity there. Mm-hmm. So I think women, if women are in power and women are in the hiring practices, I think you might see something different than what a man does. A man in management may just want to put what he looks like, what he likes to look at in front of a camera. Yeah. Whereas if it's a different person in power, they might, you know, look at it a little bit differently. So I do think age has been a problem, that we have to get away from the age discrimination, and we have to get back towards creating a more diverse program for everybody across the board.
What are the pros and cons of being an African American reporter?
The pros are that, you know, you're carrying a torch. You know, you're carrying a torch that, and it doesn't. You don't have to look back too far to understand that there weren't a lot of us around. You know, there weren't a lot of us getting opportunities to be in front of cameras and go to games and be in press boxes and shape the opinions and shape the coverages of the sports and the stars that we cover. Mm-hmm. So you definitely carry a legacy and a torch with that. That's definitely a pro. I think one of the cons is that we all get grouped in the same, you know, sort of monolithic thought process. And, you know, if something happens, it's almost like there's only one train of black thought, you know, when you get asked something. So if there's a race issue story going on, a lot of people expect black people or Asians or you know, gays and lesbians to have the same kind of outlook on things. And we're all different people. Mm-hmm. You know, there's not one way to be any specific kind of culture. And I think the more that we can do, the more that we can show that, the better we are.
Have you ever associated with a female broadcaster? Associated
as in, like,
worked
dated?
With.
Yeah, of course. I work with a lot of great, talented, wonderful female broadcasters. Sage Steele comes to mind. She's on ESPN, and she hosts the NBA Countdown show. You know, there have been several of them, you know, over the course of the years that have been. Jamel Hill, who works for ESPN, comes to mind, too. You know, there's some really talented women. Doris Burke, I'm more impressed with Doris Burke, who's a commentator. She's a play-by-play commentator and a television reporter for ESPN, than anybody I've ever worked with because of her professionalism. You know, a lot of times people think TV, in front of the camera, people don't do the legwork that it takes to get to where they are. But these people, they didn't start off in front of the camera. They started off behind the scenes and reporting and doing a lot of writing. So I think that's important.
And a lot of the times when a female is covering sports, a lot of men don't respect it. They don't take it, oh, that's coming from a female. So that's another reason why it's really hard.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, you know, because, you know, female women know their sports. You know, yeah, like I said, my son is the musician. My daughter is the athlete. You know, so I at home, you know, those roles have sort of switched. Even though and it's funny because my son wants to be the athlete, and he still could, but his talent is music. My daughter wants to be a musician and sing, but her talent is right. So that tells you they're twins. But yeah, you can't put anybody in a certain box like that just because of their gender or their race.
Do you think there aren't enough women in the field?
There can always be more. There can always be more, and you know, like I said, unique perspectives. You know, a lot of people think that just because a woman didn't play basketball or because she's not 6'6" and can talk to these players the way that, you know, guys can talk to. No, what you know isn't about what you are. It's about your knowledge. And, you know, so I think there can be more women in, and I think there's always going to be room for growth when it comes to that.
How is working with a female different from working with a male?
Honestly, now I don't see any difference. You know, one of my first co-workers, when I came to Miami to cover the Miami Heat, I eventually, in 1 year, I went from being the second reporter to being the first reporter. So the first chair guy. And then when they replaced me with the second chair, they hired a woman, Sarah Rothschild. I still remember her to this day. And I had no problems working with Sarah at all. You know, as long as she knew the game and was willing to go do the work, there's no problem with me at all when it comes to that. Not at all. Not at all.
Do you ever get nervous before an interview?
When I'm doing one or when I'm being interviewed?
When you're being, okay, let's start off when you're being interviewed.
When I'm being interviewed, no, because I think it's just, you know, it's my opportunity to tell who I am and show who I am. And it gives me a platform to be able to show that, hey, you know, it's okay to come from a small school. It's okay to not know what you wanted to do until your second year in college. It's okay to be African American. It's okay, you know, to be a black man, to show that, hey, not all of us are stereotyped into being rappers and ball players and thugs and criminals. You know, it's okay to be a man of faith. It's okay to be happily married for 15 years. It's okay, you know, to try to be the best father you can, you know, even though there were some situations where you're not going to be perfect. And it's okay, you know, to profess your love for your faith and your God. And I think those are all the things that make me calm when I'm in front of a camera now, whether I'm about to do an interview or whether I'm about to be interviewed.
What about when you're interviewing someone? Do you ever get nervous? There
was a time, I do get awestruck sometimes. You know, I mean, I do have to realize, hey, I just saw President Barack Obama. You know what I mean? Which happened, you know, a year ago. When the Miami Heat won a championship, they went to the White House. That was my assignment was to go to the White House to cover the Miami Heat meeting the president. And you see the president, you know, you grow up watching presidents all the time on TV. And then you don't realize that they're real, actual human beings until you see the actual flesh in front of you. And, you know, so to see, you know, President Obama come through in the East Room and start talking and joking, and I'm like, wow, he's right there. I can reach out and touch him if I probably couldn't because Secret Service would lock me up. But he pointed at me when he saw me, you know, in the corner trying to take a photo of him. And, you know, that's, you know, those are some moments where you do get nervous. I remember I got nervous the first time I interviewed Shaquille O'Neal, you know, because he's such a big guy, you know. No, to regular humans, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm tall, I'm a pretty big guy. But Shaq is like superhuman big. Mm-hmm. And you're like, wow, you know, what am I going to say to this guy? And you were like, that's Shaquille O'Neal. So that was the first time, and Michael Jordan as well. Those were the two guys that I really was sort of, wow, I can't believe I just talked to that guy.
Is there any other interview besides Shaq that you'll never forget?
Yes, there's one. I had a chance to, and I told you before, I'm a history buff. I love history. Mm-hmm. You know, my idols, the three men that have had the biggest impact on my life, Martin Luther King, well, four, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Malcolm X, and Eddie Robinson. You know, those four guys. Eddie Robinson was the legendary football coach at Grambling mm-hmm. State University. You know the other three, obviously. You know, those... When you look at went into you becoming who you are, you realize where those influences have come from, and I think those were the influences that touched me the most.
Before we end the interview, I want to play a game. Mm-hmm. It's called Think Fast. Do you know how to play? I
think so. So think fast and just like answer quick, right?
Yes.
Okay. All
McDonald's or Burger King?
McDonald's.
Red or blue?
Blue.
You're not answering fast enough. All right, we're going to start over.
All right, okay.
Taco Bell or KFC?
KFC.
Black or orange?
Black.
Bald or hair?
Bald.
Washington, D.C. or Miami?
Washington.
Heat or Knicks?
Knicks.
What? You going to get fired.
That's no problem at all. Thank you. All right. That was great. Wow.